Greetings everyone, welcome to a new video on Taoist Magick. Now I know what you're thinking. You've read the title of this video and you are in disbelief at the idea of becoming invisible at will. Even in a magical setting, these spells are extremely far-fetched. They are perhaps the most fantastical out of all of the topics I've covered so far in this series on Tao Magic. Before I explain them in detail, I want you to remember something important. Within Taoism, one of the first things that you are taught when learning magic is not to take anything at face value. Try to look beyond the obvious and see the hidden meanings. Please keep that in mind. The spell of becoming invisible falls under the category of transformation magic, which falls under a more specific category known as the magical transformation of man. The skill itself has existed for centuries within China, and it became quite popular within Taoist practice during the Jin dynasty. Turning invisible is defined as being the ultimate form of camouflage, rendering a person or an object totally undetectable by the human eye, because the object or person is not reflecting nor absorbing light. It instead allows light to pass through it. On the surface, it sounds a lot like transparency, but no natural material is entirely transparent. If it cannot be seen, it is invisible. What makes the Taoist spell so unique is the fact that it doesn't just render the magician invisible to other mortals. Even earthly spirits are unable to detect an invisible sorcerer. Lots of magicians in the past have used this spell to avoid karma and punishment from such spirits. A priest may attempt to evade a demon that is pursuing him by trying to defeat the electromagnetic spectrum. The old saying, "You can run but you can't hide," but if you cannot be seen, then of course you are already hidden. This only works for spirits that are stuck here on Earth. You cannot hide yourself from a Star Lord, for example, or a heavenly deity. It does work well if you've angered a nature spirit. You might be able to get away with this for a short time, but such tactics cannot be used in the long term. It is said that if the Taoist attempts to use the spell to brag and boast, or to gain fame or riches for becoming invisible, terrible fortune and bad luck will befall the practitioner. Using the spell is also risky to one's physical and emotional health. If the spell is used any more than a handful of times, it could cause catastrophic illness. There are some situations where it should be used appropriately. For example, if you are being attacked, or if you are trapped and wish to escape with your life without being detected, then becoming invisible at will is justified during such emergencies. Suo Se, the legendary Taoist sorcerer, whom I have covered on this channel already, knew the art of invisibility, which he learned from the great magical book Concealing Method of 3 volumes. In the Taoist system of magic, there are 3 different categories of invisibility. The first, known as projected invisibility, the second known as invisibility obtained through magical talismans, and the third, invisibility obtained through magical drugs. The great thing about Tao magic, you always have more ways to achieve more or less the same result. Projected invisibility is all based upon the magician's ability to detach from his or her own physicality, to break free from both mind and body, and to melt or blend into the environment around them. For example, using strong intention, one can immerse his or herself into the floor or the wall or into a tree. This spell is an illusion though. It works by affecting the observer's sensory perception. You are basically altering the mind of whoever is watching you by affecting their subconscious mind to make the person or people think you are camouflaged, hence the term projected invisibility. It works like a magical projection, which is fueled by 2 different kinds of energy, Ling Qi and Ling Shen. Ling Qi is like life force, and Ling Shen is the supernatural spirit of the divine. When these two powers are infused into a room or an altar space, they will form a powerful chamber of mind-altering energy, a force field. When a person walks into that room, they will step into this energetic chamber and it will begin changing their perceptions of reality. If the spell is performed correctly, they shouldn't be able to see that you are there because you stop reflecting and absorbing light. This skill can also render objects invisible in a fairly easy way, easy if you are healthy. Remember, these spells require a lot of qi and can leave a person feeling drained if you aren't too careful. Everything that exists contains a sequence of various ingredients that bind it together. Such ingredients include wind, water, fire, earth, air, and what is known as the Wu Ji, the non-dualistic infinity. If the magician is skilled enough, he or she can remove or suspend some of these elements from an object, a person, or a place, though doing so could be very dangerous. So let's say, for example, if I wanted my feather fan to turn invisible, this is one method of many that you could use. I'm just going to give you this one. I would use the magician's gaze approach. I would stare deeply into the object and go into a trance state. From there, I would imagine each element as a spinning, glowing ball or orb. So a ball of water, a ball of fire, a ball of earth, and a ball of air. I would use my imagination to feel the warmth of the fire, the coolness of the water, the lightness of the air, and the heaviness of the earth. Then, depending on my intentions, I would temporarily remove one of these orbs from my mind. So I would imagine one of them just evaporating or crumbling or blowing away in the wind. To make things invisible, the element of fire needs to be taken out of the picture because fire contains light. So I would visualize the ball of fire in my mind getting weaker and weaker, less and less bright. It slowly becomes more dim and cooler. I like to imagine it shrinking until it has totally disappeared from my mind. This can take several minutes or several hours. It depends on your skill level and your patience. The theory is what makes an object visible is the light in the fire that it contains. If you can halt this light, the object should not be visible. In Taoism, everything that exists has 3 levels of existence: physical, energetic, and spiritual. The magician should tap into the object on all 3 levels to render it invisible. Just because it is hidden does not mean it's gone. If you put your hand on the feather fan, you could still feel it and touch it, but it cannot be decoded by the human mind. Making items disappear or teleport to other realms is a totally different spell. In some Taoist sects, a red triangle is used, as this represents the element of fire, but I haven't used that method before. I prefer the elemental orbs. In terms of shapes, earth is represented as a square, water is represented as a circle, air as a crescent moon, and the Wu Ji takes an egg-like shape. In order to properly practice Taoist rituals of transformation, each shape should be stacked on top of each other, starting with the egg-shaped Wu Ji, followed by the moon crescent air, then onto the fire triangle, followed by a circle of water, and lastly a square earth. This is the order in which most things work, and to render objects invisible, the red fire triangle should be made black. Invisibility through magical talismans is similar to the kind of invisibility I've just discussed, but it differs somewhat due to the presence of a spirit that you will need to help you. A special magical talisman is created which contains a spirit, and when the magician uses the talisman, the spirit will be released into the world and it will conceal and eclipse anyone who is watching the magician, therefore rendering him invisible. I would recommend the immortal Lu Dongbin, one of the famous 8 immortals, because he carries a sword that destroys evil and gives him the power of invisibility. Working with heavenly beings such as immortals or deities is often quite risky. For those who enjoy using sorcery, magic that involves the use of gods to change reality, then Lu Dongbin would be the best immortal for the job. Another example of using a talisman for this spell would actually come in the form of a naturally powerful weather stone. These include stones, minerals, and rocks that are already inhabited by deities and trapped nature spirits, especially stones that are found in caves, as these have a huge range of abilities that include changing the weather, curing scorpion bites, and even being able to turn invisible, but only if the proper incantation is said out loud. So go searching those caves and see what you find. The last type of spell is known as invisibility, that is obtained through magical drugs. Now I just want to say this up front. I do not advocate drug use at all. I do not recommend that you use drugs. I'm merely providing information for the purposes of education. So please be sensible and don't take them. There are other ways to succeed with magic. However, to preserve ancient knowledge, I would like to share the teachings with you. If you want to be invisible, magicians of old would drink ashes within herbal water for 10 days. After the 10th day, if the magician wanted to reappear, he or she should face the right, and if they wanted to disappear, then they should face the left. In Taoism, ferns are associated with becoming invisible, more specifically bracken. The invisible spell requires a lot of natural qi from the earthly plane. Poppy seeds and dry fern leaves would be ground together during the evening under a moonlight. Other ingredients include myrrh, marjoram, slippery elm, and dill that is fresh. One would also add fresh spring water from a clean spring and some almond oil, mixing it together over a period of a couple of hours. Now I know what you're thinking. It sounds utterly revolting. Surely you don't consume that. Well, that's right. You don't drink it. You just use the mixture by pouring or sprinkling small amounts on objects, which is supposed to render them invisible. You'll get a kick out of this. I've heard stories of warriors in Han Dynasty China who would use this mixture to make daggers and swords invisible, so they could attempt to assassinate the emperor by smuggling weapons into the palace. Simply by pouring the contents onto the swords, it was thought that the sword could still function as a weapon, but it wouldn't be detected by anyone. Heliotrope is another ingredient, a flower which relates strongly to the fire element and the sun. In other words, it's very young and it's very intense. It is thought that if the Taoist were to fill a hole with the flower, then he or she would be hidden from the visible light spectrum. Mistletoe was also thought to have this power. Wearing it around the neck would cloak the wearer in a very short space of time. Wearing a crown of hazel leaves also has the power to make a person invisible. When the crown is removed, the magician's visible state will be restored. There are many different herbs, flowers, and plants that are thought to have this ability. The cool thing about Taoism, depending on what school of thought you follow, for example, if you follow the Zheng Yi school of mysticism, or the Shan Qing school, or the Chuan Zen school, which started in northern China, you will always get wildly different interpretations and teachings. For example, the Way of the Celestial Masters believe that sin, committing sin, would cause the body to lose qi, which would then make the person, the sinner, physically ill, and the only way to cure the illness and restore the qi would be to repent. I'm not sure if this is still an existing belief, but I don't personally believe that, but I still respect the school. There are two different kinds of Taoist practice: religious Taoism and folk Taoism. I practice folk. So, in my opinion, just find what makes sense to you and disregard what you feel isn't very helpful. All of these schools have something great to offer. Remember at the start of the video I talked about not taking things at face value. So here is where the invisibility spell makes more sense. I believe, this is just me here, I believe the spell isn't designed to render you invisible so much as it is designed to decrease the chance that you will be spotted and detected. So if you want to fall under the radar, if you want to avoid attention from other people, this spell can be used not to make you physically invisible, but to make other people not pay any attention to you at all. Now this could backfire. For example, if you are crossing the street, a car could hit you, or you could be driving and get into an accident. Criminals could also use this method to make themselves go undetected to avoid being caught by the law. They aren't invisible, but the magic they are using to conceal their actions makes it harder for other people to track them down. This is 100% possible. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you found this informative. Take care, and I'll see you soon.